So I wanted to sit down and make today's video because I don't know if it's just me, but I've noticed article after article and post after post of some celebrity or influencer being caught red-handed with fake luxury items. I'm by no means a stranger to the fakes in the luxury community. I've even talked about in previous videos my interactions with fakes in my personal life, but it's always a topic that fascinates me because of how advanced that industry has become and how much more relevant I feel in the recent past, especially with everything going on in the economic climate, the cultural climate, to the extent where this global industry actually is estimated to be worth $1.9 trillion. Before, owning some fake goods, you'd almost be laughed at and shamed for that. It's now almost celebrated. For example, there are so many TikToks around where people are unboxing their DHL Gate fake bags. I think it's that website anyway. And there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of FOMO, if you're watching, that you might want to get a fake as well. And you skip all the rigmarole, don't you, of having to queue up and play a game. And now, while I do think that the fakes industry is morally and ethically corrupt, I do understand why we're currently at the place that we're in today and why people are finding fakes to be more and more of a viable option. With rising inflation, increased cost of living, and then you've also got brands on the other side of the fence increasing their prices, they're having more exclusivity, and they're moving away from a demographic which could usually save their money to buy luxury goods to ones that already have a lot of money. That's not really therefore a surprise that this younger demographic in particular are honestly gravitating towards the more accessible and a lot more affordable luxury fakes. And I do feel sympathetic towards this younger demographic in particular because, I remember back in like 10 years ago or something like that, when I first started dipping my toes in the luxury waters, if you will, and what the cost of goods then was compared to even now. And the fact that I found it a struggle back then, fast forward to today, I definitely feel that the price is a lot higher and the quality is a lot lower. The youth of today, I think the dreams of getting the real deal are very much as further and further into the distance, whereas therefore luxury fakes, on the other hand, and especially if you get a good super fake, then that seems a little bit more accessible, within reach. And especially if you are just figuring out your style, if you're at the beginning of your fashion journey, a fake that gets you the look that you want but could be relatively interchangeable or, so some, a bit more disposable, is a viable option and a lot more cost effective. And sometimes I almost find it difficult, especially with the rise of super fakes, to notice when a fake bag is actually fake. They're getting that good now. This is something that you're not just seeing amongst the lower to middle class, you're actually seeing this increasingly amongst the rich and famous, which is, I suppose, the topic of today's video and why it's so shocking. We're also seeing the emergence of profiles like the Birkin Slayer, the most popular, I think, of all the accounts that actively seek out, some would argue, shame celebrities and influencers for carrying these fakes, namely the Hermes Birkins and Kellys, which of course are the most coveted holy grail bags that you can get. Their profile is basically to at these big celebrity and influencer names and ask where they got certain bags from. And you would honestly be surprised at how many big names in the influencer industry in particular are on that list. And even shows like Sex and the City, they're caught using replica Hermes handbags, which honestly, they popularize, I feel, the Hermes Birkins, Kellys, etc. in their shows. So to have that be something that a show of this stature is doing is absolutely crazy. And even I remember when watching Singles Inferno, which was a Netflix show, a Korean show that I really, really loved. I remember the first season, there was a bit of a controversy because one of the main characters was essentially wearing head to toe fake Chanels, and I remember her wardrobe was just insane. It was so gaudy, it was so flashy, but to know that it was all fake and then she had to do an apology, so embarrassing. Therefore, it really does kind of give you that wake-up call that this is not just a problem to do with the masses, if you will. This is actually something that is prevalent even on the higher ups. The reason why this matters is when it comes to social media and very impressionable audiences, especially impressionable young women, the youth of today, I think first and foremost, you're misleading your audience. You're misleading the masses into thinking that, they can afford these items, that these are things that are within reach. Proudly saying that you have fakes is one thing, but actually to pretend that you have the real deal and to give off this air of almost superiority, because let's be honest, items are like trophies, especially when they're of that kind of price tag and of that exclusivity. You're pretending to have this item, this trophy, whereas in actual fact it's fake. And sometimes people are brazen enough to even tag the brand, like the Hermes or Chanel or whatever. I think that's totally gross. I think being misleading and not authentic is one of the biggest problems I find with the influencer industry, with social media in general. Nothing is real, and especially nowadays when you see the Birkenslayer accounts and whatnot outing all these people, you really have to think, what is real that I'm seeing? I mean, if people's faces aren't even real as well, and then you've got people's bags and things, misleading people, especially young people, is so damaging because it gives people a false sense of reality and potentially false goalposts as well. And then the next one is, of course, the damage it does to the actual brands themselves that are being ripped off, that are being replicated. Obviously, not only do they lose a lot of prestige, but I think that it also cheapens the brands as well. A lot of the knockoffs that you can find on street corners, some of them, again, brazen enough to go outside the actual stores like the Harrods and the Selfridges to sell their really bad, poor knockoffs on the streets. I think that is just so shameful and cheeky, but it also means that for the unsuspecting person who doesn't really notice the intricacies of a fake versus the real thing, they might just go ahead and buy that fake one. I think that's just going to have the same effect, when in actuality a lot of what you're buying in terms of the bag is to do with the brand, it's to do with the prestige, it's to do with the heritage, the craftsmanship, the quality, and it's becoming a problem for luxury fashion houses everywhere. And obviously that's going to be a very expensive, hefty cost to try and think of new creative ways to get over the replicas and the fakes industry in general. And of course, another reason is that this industry is not sustainable, and it's also extremely unethical. I mean, I don't even need to drain, I'm sure, the amount of workers' safety concerns, low wages, the humanitarian aspects of the actual operations themselves. There's also the whole underground nature of the industry itself, which I shan't go into here, but is well known. It's definitely a black market. And of course, the goods and materials that are used are not going to be of quality. They are not going to have been ethically sourced. And by no means am I therefore saying that luxury goods are like the angels and the star pupils. Not at all. But at least, you know, with that premium, you are paying for the increased health and safety and just ethics, whereas you don't know what kind of sweatshop operation is happening, especially at the rates that people are churning these out. It's probably worth at this stage mentioning that I know a lot of people will argue that some might be, you know, oblivious to the fact that they have a fake item. Maybe they bought it on the reseller market and were pre-loved. And, you know, I'm not going to deny the fact that there are super fakes that even actual authenticators on Vestiaire or even in the luxury goods stores themselves cannot tell the difference on. But those are few and far between. We're talking about the rules, not the exceptions. And I think most of the people that I've at least seen from my own personal observations, and even on accounts like the Birkenslayer, which are dedicated towards outing these people, you see repeat offenders. So it's not just the one-off which you can almost be forgiven for. It's people like in Singles Inferno that wear items head to toe fake, or maybe they have an outfit with the sprinkling of the real deal, the rest is fake to throw people off. But in any case, they're usually well aware of what they're doing. I tend to take that one with a little pinch of salt, but I thought it's worth mentioning just on the off chance that there are those types of people out there who could be duped. Yes, I just wanted to cover the topic of why are rich people buying fake bags? They obviously have the means, or you'd assume that they have the means, but why are they resorting to this? And I think a lot of you can imagine this, especially psychological reasons why, again, relating to optics and the social pressure and their image overall. And I think just to reel off the reasons and the factors that I personally can think of anyway, of course, number one, straight up there, because it would be a lie if it wasn't true, even for people like you and I in the masses, is that it denotes success and prestige. Because what shows success more than a $10,000 or higher handbag? It's almost like part of the starter pack of influencers, isn't it? To have a little Birkin bag or a Kelly bag or a Chanel classic flat. Obviously, to get something of that value, it is a trophy. It denotes your position in society, your totem pole ranking, I suppose. And a lot of these people don't want to go and jump through all these hoops or potentially spend the money to get this prestige. They want to go straight up there. They want to keep up those appearances and show that they've shot straight to the top. So that's number one, first and foremost. And then number two, I feel like they want to create, therefore, a sense of envy. Whether you like it or not, posting something that is very rare and exclusive and hard to get by nature will create some elements of envy, potentially even jealousy and resentment. You know, obviously there's the best cases where it can produce inspiration and aspiration, but you will also want to have a little bit of a snobbery and be a little bit, I suppose, braggadocious in the way that you have posted and signaled that you are better essentially than everyone else. I know it's not the best way to think, but I've actually made a video in the past around a post that Chris Williamson, a podcaster who hosts the show Modern Wisdom, mentioned how a lot of women buy luxury goods to scare off their female rivals. And I won't drain that too much again, but it's a very interesting theory about how it helps to mate guard so other women do not come near your man. And I do think as an extension of that, there is an element of image guarding, brand guarding, or just guarding your position in society, such that it's a massive differentiator between where you stand and where the others stand. The whole reason that we have a luxury industry is because by nature it is not basic, it is not something that is easily consumable or found. And I've covered again in many other videos around the values that make up the luxury aspect, I suppose, of it all. And it's always to do with setting yourself apart from others and creating that social positioning, and that obviously creates envy. And another reason, number three, relating to this is that a lot of influencers also want to save face and they're reacting to peer pressure. If you then don't have the means to afford these goods on an authentic basis regularly, and let's be honest, it's a very expensive habit, especially with price increases these days, you're going to feel the pressure from your peers who are also in the industry, or also your followers, to keep up these appearances. These items are not disposable. It's not like going to your local Primark or something. So by nature, the only way to keep up then is to get a quick fix through a super fake. So there is that, and I do think it's a very dangerous social contagion. And I think it's made even more difficult if then, and this is point number four, that they are a trendsetter or content creator, that they have to constantly stay current and therefore relevant by switching up their wardrobe. And I personally don't like trends, but a lot of people do, and a lot of these influencers do make their money off of advertising, you know, new brands and their new collections. And so to stay relevant, they've got to keep up and potentially buy these fakes. And then on to another reason, number five, a lot of these celebrities or influencers actually don't have the time or potentially the money, which is I suppose the most shocking part, to be able to acquire these goods. Now, obviously, the time element refers to playing certain loyalty games. So obviously, Hermes is the one that is used the most as an example. Chanel's trying to get up there. Louis Vuitton is also doing those kind of moves with their Neverpool. I could go on and on and on. With all of these mechanisms to make it more exclusive, you obviously have to invest a lot of time into building relationships with sales associates, but also on the money front, this is a very expensive endeavor. Even if you were to be able to buy an item outright, that's in the tens of thousands now for certain classic items. If you want to have to do the Birkin bait and, you know, try and get a Birkin or Kelly, especially one of the more coveted sizes, then obviously you're going to have to buy a lot of useless tat, or useful, depends on who is speaking to, but you know, you're gonna have to buy a lot of things to get there. And do these influencers have enough time and money to be able to do that? But especially money. I have noticed in a lot of influencer communities, a lot of people who feign like they do have a lot of money actually be the most skint and stingy people that I've ever met, to a point where it's actually shameful. Like, they can't even afford their own smoothie. I'm not even joking. Some of the things that I've seen is just absolutely crazy. You'd think that they earn a lot of money, but in reality they don't, and they struggle. And I think the influencers, oh, and I just remembered her name, I think she's called Carador. She's one of the people that I am so surprised. You know, you'd think she could own so many bags, and perhaps she does have the odd real one. Obviously she couldn't be so big and have such a huge following and be invited by all these brands if she didn't. But you realise a lot of the goods that they do have are gifted, and actually when it comes to forking out their own money, you know, she buys fakes. And, you know, you could say, oh, she got a reseller or she didn't know, but she has been carrying plenty of fake bag. And actually, as someone who's kind of in that industry and has been to those events and seen and observed, a lot of what they get in terms of financial value is soft dollar. They're getting meals, they're getting trips out, they're getting items which are usually loaned. You'd be actually pretty shocked at how little these people make, and therefore why buying fakes is a viable option. And then the final reason, I believe it's number 6, is that generally some of these people think that no one will check them. I think they feel like they can get away with it, especially if they have a track record perhaps of having real items. They think that they can sprinkle in a little bit of fake and no one will notice if it's hidden amongst the real authentic goods. There is of course an element of ignorance is bliss. If no one knows, no one will find out, no one's any the wiser, they just crack on. They will be the first to talk about ethics and sustainability, and yet they will be the ones that are carrying these very unethically made and corrupt items. Your values obviously have a price tag, and when it comes to keeping up with trends, I suppose they just turn a blind eye, which is the easiest thing to do, isn't it? Now, having rattled off all these reasons, I do think a common misconception is that there is a stereotype of a typical counterfeit buyer and that they're very homogenous, but obviously in the reasons that I've covered, they're pretty diverse. Some people might basically fall into the category of all of those factors being true, some only a few. Consumption of counterfeits is definitely driven by different motives, and I've actually found an interesting article in just kind of wanting to dive deeper into this topic and did a bit of research, and it's an article in Style magazine, and they actually talk about 4 types of people that buy fakes, and I will drop the link down in the description below because I do think it is a worthy read. The article was actually called "These 4 Types of People Buy Fake Luxury Goods." It's quite a long title, and they touch upon a lot of the themes that I've come to myself just a little bit earlier. And so the first of the 4 profiles is that of the dreamitator. So this is obviously a combination of the words dreamer and imitator, and they're basically the closest to the stereotypical buyer. Maybe not so much in the rich and famous demographic or the influencer demographic, but these are usually the young people, and these are the people obviously at the start of their luxury fashion or just indeed fashion journey. They're novices to the game. They lack the financial resources to purchase these items, and they want the Louis Vuitton bags, they want the Chanel, the Hermes, but they don't have any hope in hell right now of getting those items given that they are so young. But they want the style, they want the prestige, especially if they're seeing their favorite influencers and celebrities wearing them. To elevate their status in the short term, they basically buy these counterfeits, and they're usually poorer quality because obviously this demographic are very young, they don't have that much money, they probably have pocket money. That's a shortcut access for them to this luxury lifestyle, and that's where you're getting, again, all of these unboxings online for really poor quality ones, or potentially, they're the ones going to the markets. So they're not really looking and having an eye for detail here, they just want the experience, and then perhaps it'll be disposable, or maybe even, and I've covered this before as well, they were kind of like these training wheels of buying the real deal later down the line. Can you actually be trusted with a branded item? And then the next group is known here in the article as face savers, and these are usually young professionals. So you're thinking probably mid to late 20s perhaps, and they're basically buying these luxury goods to blend in and fit in with their social group. And again, this kind of touches upon the peer pressure element that we talked about earlier. They're feeling the pinch, I'm sure, with things like rent and cost of living, so they do appreciate the value of luxury brands, but not really enough to fork out that much money, and they do think that counterfeits deliver enough quality, so they're probably looking a little bit more into the detail, but they're not going to spend an arm and a leg on a really good replica. And now let's move on to the third category, and that is smart fakers, and these are more middle income individuals, and they're definitely a lot more price sensitive and style conscious. These counterfeits provide them with an extended wardrobe that includes authentic brands, but also a little bit of sprinkling of something a little bit more fun. The smart fakers, they are meticulous in choosing the right counterfeit item. They would definitely go into a lot more detail, a lot more research to make sure that it's passable, because they do want to have up-to-date fashion in their wardrobes. They want to keep up with the trends. And then your final category is that of the fraudsters, and these are typically higher income individuals, very well-known individuals. And this, I feel like, is the most interesting group, and it's, I guess, the predominant discussion that we're having today, because these individuals can definitely, at least on the surface anyway, afford to purchase these luxury goods, but for some reason or another, probably because of fast fashion, they want to get up to date with the latest trends, or, you know, maybe they just don't have that much money as we think, and they know that they can get away with mixing counterfeits with original luxury goods. That, I think, is the key point. They think that they can get away with it. Obviously, they would have a lot of reputational damage and would lose a lot of face if they were to be discovered, but they feel like the chances are low, and I think they just love a good deal, according to this article, which, who doesn't love a good deal? Even when you're rich, you definitely, I think the richest people are definitely the ones that enjoy a good deal. These are basically the 4 different profiles, and, you know, I would be really curious to hear down in the comments if you believe these 4 categories are reflective. I think they're a good way of kind of providing a little bit more of like a flavor in reality of who these people are, and so it gives a very good idea, at least psychologically, of why people will buy fakes. Now, from my personal perspective, I don't buy into fakes. I've obviously had fakes in the past when I was a lot younger for high ticket items like handbags, watches, jewelry, ready to wear, shoes. I'd rather just not buy them than to buy fakes of those. But I know I am one of the privileged minority when it comes to that. I know for a lot of people, like I mentioned, you know, it's a tough world out there. So I know fakes will be something that will remain to be a viable option, even if further work is done. This industry is not going anywhere anytime soon, at least, but there are definitely several mechanisms by which brands and also consumers as well can gain control over their brand exposure in the marketplace once again. The first method I think is viable is availability of the brand stocks and also other cheaper alternatives, whether that be within the brand themselves or other brands coming to the market. So obviously, if certain brands price their items in a way that is accessible, even if it is a high price, the fact that you can buy it and it's not priced on request, or you have to jump through all these hoops to get a certain item, might give people more of an image that these items are within their financial reach. And obviously the reasons that people are gravitating towards fakes is because they feel like it's not within their reach. And obviously this creates a challenge for the brands to address the delicate balance between what is accessible and what is exclusive. That is something that obviously will take great pains to work through. But I think if that balance is struck, a lot of people will feel like actually they want to hold off and steer away from fakes because they feel like it's actually within their reach, within their grasp, to go for the actual luxury items themselves authentically. Or similarly, if there are other cheaper alternatives from that brand that are also very viable for them, you're seeing a lot of brands emerging into that space right now, then obviously they would probably spend that money on those brands than to go to a fake. Another method could also be having more social stigma to owning a counterfeit. I hate to say it, but I do think shame and guilt are effective emotions that every human needs to feel. Even if it doesn't feel good to feel shame, it's so important for especially people who are in the smart faker and fraudster categories, basically the higher income categories. I think it's important for them to lose face. And obviously this is because there is definitely a moral aspect to rejecting counterfeit purchases, and if the government encourages that, or similarly the brands themselves or on social media, there is suddenly a campaign or a movement by which we start to actually call out individuals much more and stop making it cool and glamorizing fakes. And now this can be through legislative action. So for example, Japan, I think they've done a great job of doing anti-counterfeiting campaigns. So has France themselves. These, I think, are important emotions that people should feel and think twice about when they next want to consider a luxury fake. Accounts like the Birkin Slayer, they might be controversial. They might have maybe harsh measures when it comes to outing people, but I do think these people deserve it. They knew exactly the risks and the reputational damage that could have been done, and yet they still did it. Actions have consequences, and I think in 2023, we are seeing that people want to have no consequences when it comes to their actions. Whether it's legislated or not, a natural movement, I think social stigma is incredibly important and vital towards moving the needle on the fakes industry. And then finally, I think passing legislation, having the government crack down on fake imports and exports, like France and Japan have done, amongst many others, I think to make it punishable to sell or to possess a fake is something that will reduce the accessibility, it will reduce the demand, because people will think twice about something if there is a potential punishable crime associated with it. If legislation for receiving countries was to come in to crack down on them and to make it potentially illegal, then I think a lot of people think twice about committing a crime, as do most crimes. When people realize they can actually be punished, they tend to not want to do them. And we've seen in other scenarios where, you know, not to get into politics too much, but where there is no crackdown or when there is low intervention from the government or police or whatever, that nothing is done and it just runs rife. I think in that way, those measures, those 3 measures, will be really important in helping to at least combat a lot of the dangerous effects of fakes, and also to reduce that social pressure. I think that is so apparent, especially with the social media right now. I think it's so dangerous for people growing up in today's world to think that this is the reality of being a celebrity or influencer, when in actuality they're living a false reality, and they're also supporting a very, very destructive industry as well. So that was everything that I wanted to cover in this video. And you know, while counterfeiting won't ever be completely defeated, I do think the message should be loud and clear for everybody, and that is the purpose of today's video. Is about fake luxury should never be something that is in fashion, that should be glamorized, that should be aspired to. Celebrities and influencers who are wearing fakes and whatnot, you know, the best way to respond to them is to vote with your voice and your feet. That will obviously tell them all that they need to know. But I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below on this particular topic. In any case, I will leave this video right here. Thank you as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.